Now we're on air. Good afternoon, everyone. Today's September 27, 2023, and I'd like to welcome everyone to the Nevada Game Control Board's industry workshop regarding the board's technology division. Along with me is Member Watkins, and soon to be joining us is Member Judge Assad. First of all, thank you all for being here today. If you would, please rise and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Madam Secretary, has today's workshop been posted in accordance with Nevada's open meeting law?
Yes, it has.
Thank you. Let's begin with our first public comment section. This is time for anyone to bring forward public comment. However, if you plan on providing testimony in the actual workshop itself, you can wait for that, or you can come up at either time, but there will be more time to speak during the actual workshop if that's your intention. Madam Secretary, please go ahead.
This item is placed on the agenda to give the public an opportunity to comment on gaming-related matters. Anyone wishing to address the board may do so at this time. Comments by each person are limited to 3 minutes as a reasonable time, place, and manner restriction. If board members ask questions of the speaker, the time needed to address those questions will not count against the speaker's 3-minute time period. If speakers have any handouts or written copies of verbal comments to provide for the record, please hand them to the enforcement agent seated to your left in Las Vegas or behind you in Carson City.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. Pursuant to the state open meeting law, matters brought to the board's attention during public comment cannot be acted upon, but of course we welcome your comments as well as comments from my fellow board members. Let's first go to Carson City. Is there anyone wishing to make public comment in Carson City? If so, please step to the podium, introduce yourself and spell your name. Seeing none, let's go here to Las Vegas. Is there anyone in Las Vegas wishing to make public comment at the beginning of the meeting? All right. Yes, sir. Please step forward. Introduce yourself and spell your name for the record. We don't have a court reporter today, but for open meeting law purposes and public records, this meeting is being audio and video recorded and kept in public records requests.
Thank you very much. My name is Ted Hartwell, Hartwell. Thanks for this opportunity to speak to the board this afternoon. I'm a 32-year member of the research faculty of the Desert Research Institute and have also consulted to the Nevada Council on Problem Gambling for approximately 8 years. I serve on the State Advisory Committee on Problem Gambling at the behest of the most recent 4 governors. I also serve on the board of directors to the National Council on Problem Gambling. And I introduce myself that way mainly for purposes of credentialing. I'm not speaking on behalf of any of those organizations today, but on behalf of myself as someone who is in long-term recovery from a gambling problem for about 16 years. I was somebody who had not only the capacity to destroy myself and my family, but at a moment in time had the potential to impact this nation's security. So I know, as few others do, what potential damage one person can do in this area can be. And I would just ask for your attention and others' attention as you move forward with modernizing the process for approving new technologies, that you take great consideration for the opportunity to do some independent review of those new technologies' potential to adversely impact those of us that are at particular risk of developing a gambling problem, and also focus on the capacity for some of these new technologies in a very exciting way. I think a lot of the cashless wagering systems and things like the digital wallets, digital ledgers have the potential also to help us identify people who are transitioning into a gambling problem and pull them back so that they are able to return to healthy gambling before it becomes a disorder. So that's the only comment I wish to present at this time. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Is there anyone else here in Las Vegas wishing to make public comment this afternoon? All right, seeing none, we will close the public comment section. For the record, I would say if any of you get the chance, please sign in to the register book over there. That will help us for the purposes of our minutes. Certainly, if you speak, we'll get you on the record, but it is good for the minutes of the meeting to know who was here. So you don't have to speak, but it'd be great to sign into the book. Also, one other housekeeping matter, it is very warm in here today. The state is gracious enough to allow us some very limited amount of air conditioning. Apparently, we have used it up for today. So I apologize for that, and we will take breaks as necessary if it gets too hot in here. Our one item of business today is discussion regarding technology division of the Gaming Control Board. That's very broad for the purpose of being sure that everybody gets to be heard today. We had our first technology division workshop back in March. And then after that time, around that same time, the governor put a freeze on regulations across the state, something that I personally agree with. I believe that there's far too much red tape in government in general. And so the governor wanted a freeze so that we wouldn't be trying to pass new regulations during the legislative session. And certainly he didn't want any passing of regulations that hinders business. So the focus today, as it was back in March, and we'll be going forward as long as I've got the gavel, is trying to put in regulation reform which streamlines business and doesn't provide any hindrance to it. And I think that collaborative effort is what we're here for today. The spirit of this meeting is that we want to be down here having a real discussion, and that's why the fellow board members and myself are down here rather than sitting up on the dais like we did last time. I think that worked out well to create more of a conversation rather than a back and forth to the dais, and so we're going to try to do that again today. I will assure you that our goal here is to get to yes, and everything we do in licensing matters. We're a law enforcement agency, we're a regulatory agency, we're a licensing agency. In licensing matters and approval matters, especially in technology issues, our goal is to get to yes. That doesn't mean we're always going to get there. There's certain things that statutory wise, regulatory wise, we simply can't get there, but our goal is to try to get there. Along with that spirit today, I'm going to ask that we do what I'm going to call the 1-to-1 ratio, which means anybody can come up and you can complain about whatever you want, but you got to come up with a solution. So a 1-to-1 ratio today will be in effect. What we're going to start with today is what I was talking about where we left off last time. We left the last meeting, as you'll see up here. This was the snapshot we took, and I said, I want you to hold me accountable, and I'm going to hold you accountable as an industry. We talked about regulations, and the reason why it says NRS 463-0175 is 01715 is not that that's a regulation, but that's the definition of a manufacturer. And we talked about, could there be assuming responsibility? For now, there hasn't been drafting on that particular regulation, but I left that up there in the sense that if anybody wants to move forward with the assume responsibility piece of changing that regulation, that's available there. The statutes we talked about was the chance for VC and angel investment. I believe that was something that Mr. Scheer might have brought up. So we're not at the statute stage. That'll be coming up next year. And I will leave that to anybody who wants to focus on that statutory change or anything else. Certainly bring those up to the Gaming Control Board at the appropriate time over the next few months. We'll start setting our legislative bills in place between the first and second quarter of next year. Let's go to the things that was really the meat and potatoes from last time, the not requiring regulatory revision or statutory change. We talked about field trials with more conditions. Since the time of March, even though there was a freeze on regulations, that doesn't mean that the board hasn't been having a lot of internal meetings about possible revision, and it doesn't mean we haven't been having external meetings with members and stakeholders in the industry. This one we'll be talking today, field trials with more conditions. We're actually going the opposite. What we're going to talk about today is less field trials or field trials with very little conditions. Less steps in the new gaming approval process. For new games, you saw we put out an industry notice that says if another state with a regulatory system similar to Nevada has already approved a new game, and that's been out on the floor with 10 machines for 30 days, that's going to be deemed approved in Nevada. So I know that's a small microcosm when you're talking about new games that come out, but new gaming devices, excuse me, I need to be clear, not new games, new gaming devices. That's a step in the right direction that shows you where our philosophy is coming from. ITL approval equals Nevada approval. It's going to be a big conversation we're going to have today. That would be a huge step, as you all know, for Nevada to do. We've been doing this for 70 years to allow simply the ITL to say that something's approved and Nevada approves it. First of all, let's talk about terminology. That's the words that are up there. But as you all know, it's actually the ITL certifying. The ITLs don't approve. So the ITL does the certification, still got to come back for Nevada approval. You're going to hear some ideas today that I think are, I'm going to use the word revolutionary. I hope that's not too big of a stretch, but that's what we're shooting for today. I'm excited to be here because one of the reasons I took this job was to make radical change, to make revolutionary change. And if we can get it done collaboratively, this is going to be a big step in the right direction. We're going to talk about test cases today. We're going to talk about how can we move forward in that direction. Release notes, that was something that came up, and I'm going to in a minute turn this over to Chief Jim Barbie, and we're going to blow through release notes. We're going to show you something today that we think is leaps and bounds past release notes. It's going to be something that Nevada's ever done before, and I'll leave all of the shock and awe to Chief Barbie, but we are really looking forward to what he's coming up with today in terms of categories. And then finally, comparison of the Nevada process versus other regulated jurisdictions. As we talked about last time, we hear a lot during cocktail party chatter or when we're having small groups that maybe Nevada isn't the first to get new equipment out on the gaming floor. And so the question that the fellow board members and myself had was, well, show us examples. We don't get off to New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Michigan, other states on a regular basis. You all in the industry, you're putting products out across the United States, you're putting products out across the world. So what we were looking for is real concrete examples. If it was taking us 8 notes to name that tune, and you're telling us that there's 10 other jurisdictions that are naming the exact same tune in 2 notes, then we want to be doing that. And if we can't do it in 2 notes, we want to be doing it 1 note, Nevada. We want to be the best in the world. People talk about gold standard. I talk about the most effective regulating body for gaming industry in the world. That's what I'm talking about. So with that, I believe AGM has got a presentation today where they actually went out and looked at concrete examples, and I look forward to hearing from that on them today, trying to compare some apples to apples to the extent we can. So over the last 8 months since I've been here, I've really tried to educate myself as much as I can on the technology division, the things we do internally, and the things that you all do externally. So now, without the freeze being put on new regulations, our goal is today to talk about some concrete examples. And then we leave here today, I'm going to add up to the new whiteboard over here, which you'll see has said what has been done. So since we met in March, you're aware that foreign gaming requirements were reduced. I know a lot of you in the manufacturing industry were very happy to hear that. We eliminated the hurdle for system games by removing pre-approval to install. We reduced field tests for new games, which I mentioned earlier, new gaming devices. Risk-tolerant approach to field trials. You heard me talk about that last time, and I think if you've been presenting anything to the lab in the last 8 months, the philosophy over here is that we're going to be risk tolerant. That doesn't mean that we're going to ever bend a statute, a regulation, anything ethical, anything moral, but to the extent that we can be a little more risk tolerant, we're going to lean that direction with the idea that speed is good for the industry and is good for the citizens of the state of Nevada. And then the last thing up here, I'm just going to call it ACEs. And with that, I would like to turn the meeting over to Chief Barbie and have you explain what ACEs means for the group.
Hi, good afternoon. Jim Barbie with the Technology Division. First, I don't know that I'm going to blow many of your doors off because I've talked to a few of you about this over the years, so you're probably already familiar with it. But I am excited about this ACEs initiative. ACEs, approval categories for equipment and systems. What we're looking at is, again, taking more of a risk-tolerant approach to software that's being deployed. We've taken some time, gone through what you as manufacturers submit in your modifications, reviewing the actual changes that are made. And the majority of those changes are either not regulatory in nature in Nevada. Let's say you're doing a change for another jurisdiction to a product to regulate, or they're low risk from a regulated standpoint. You're optimizing a database or something along those lines. So we've come up with categories that we're going to classify these changes into. The first category will be our category one are those changes that affect the controlled object. Just for those of you who may not be familiar, a system of any type, we're talking about associated equipment systems here. This would be online slot metering, cashless wagering, race and sports pool systems, bingo systems, and like. Those systems are comprised of objects, software objects. Those objects have a signature that's associated with that. That's how we manage change control. A lot of times changes get made that impact that signature that don't have that regulatory impact, that don't have a regulatory impact in Nevada, but do impact the signature. Those we're going to group into category one changes. Those type of changes would be along the lines of changes for another jurisdiction, making W-2 changes. You are applying a patch to a non-regulated operating system, optimizing a database, improving your search functionality. It's a UI change. Those type of things that they don't have a regulatory impact. So how we're going to approach those category one changes is, I stole this from our friends in New Jersey. I don't want to steal their thunder, but it really is a notify and do. We'll ask you to let us know of the changes that you made. Give us the signature before and after. We'll keep that for our records, and then you can go ahead and deploy it. What we're going to ask, though, is that within 6 months, you get that category one change certified through the ITL process. The next level of change will be our category two. These are changes that actually do impact regulated objects. Changes that have a regulatory impact that are contained in regulated objects. These type of changes, I better read what I have before I get too much away on that. These type of changes would be along the lines of communication handling, changes to forms, reconfiguring, how information is displayed at the operator level, interfaces with your player tracking, your promotional, your loyalty system, or changes to those type of systems. And the key caveat here is they don't have a revenue impact. So that would be those changes that are lower risk that don't have a revenue impact. With those changes, we are going to require that you get approval for those, but we're going to eliminate the need for an ITL certification. So what we're looking for with the ACES program or ACES initiative is eliminate the wait. This is going to be less trips to the ITL. So your category two will also condition that approval that you have to get that certified within the next 6 months of approval. Then our third category, and this is really the ACES SPADES approvals. This is what you typically do. These would be those that have a revenue impact, introduce new features or functionality, materially impact the operation of the system. For example, you're going from an on-prem to a hosted solution. Those do require ITL certification and board approval. What we're expecting is that when you get your category threes done, you'll incorporate all of the category ones and twos that have occurred since the last category change. Now, what's exciting about this, when we're talking to the industry, you've migrated to be software development companies, and we can appreciate that you have software development cycles. Whatever your sprint is, whatever your scheduled rollouts are, we're hoping that this gives you greater flexibility to provide support to your customers, to the dynamic needs of the industry, and align with your internal software development processes. I think forward-looking is huge in this too. We know that a few of you will be going to software as a service sometime in the future. This approach will allow you to roll those changes out in a more expedited manner. So I'm really excited about this. What I want to say, we're looking to roll this out in November. Just need to finalize some internal processes. We're willing to take some suggestions from the industry on any success stories you may have had elsewhere. But we will get an industry notice out here shortly. One of the things I want to encourage each of you to do is work with John Lastuski, our deputy chief, and he's responsible for the lab. You'll want to work with John and understand for your unique system, what will those categories be? And once you get that dialogue going and that understanding developed, I think things will flow a lot more smoothly in the future. We ask for your patience getting started. I'm sure there's going to be a few hitches in the get along once we get up and rolling, but we're excited about this. I think too, and again, I don't want to steal the thunder. I did look at, you guys said, hey, we can do it this way elsewhere. So I did go look at a couple of other jurisdictions. The way New Jersey does it, I may have taken a little bit from them. I may have taken a little bit from maybe Michigan. But I think what Nevada is doing, to use the chair's word, this is revolution, this approach to technology approval and change control. So I'm excited about this one.
Thank you, Chief. I am as well. And I want to hear your thoughts. Just, we got that, flat-footed dropped on you today. And so think about that, and we'll take questions in a minute. But there's a couple other things I want to drop on you as well before we start taking questions. The next one I want to do is I want to have Deputy Chief Lastusky tell about an issue that we receive that kind of bogs us down in timing wise and bogs you down a little bit of timing wise when we talk about field trials. And what I'm going to call this is we're going to call this ante up, and you'll know in a minute why I'm calling it ante up. Go ahead and tell them about the fact pattern.
Certainly. John Lastusky with the Technology Division for the record. So unlike a normal product approval, when we do a field trial, there's three parties involved. There's us, the manufacturer, and the trial location. Trying to coordinate weekly communications between the three causes a little bit of friction, a little bit more than the normal approval process. One thing that we've noticed and measured over the years is the amount of time to the field trial process that trying to coordinate with maybe overworked, overburdened, or under-resourced licensees creates. We've had many trials, and it's very common, run several months longer than they need to. Not necessarily because there's a deficiency with the product, not necessarily because we can't audit the relevant reports in a quick amount of time, but rather we just struggle to get that information from the licensee. So one thing we were exploring doing is taking that burden off of the trial location, rather than having their overworked accounting department do those trial procedures on a daily, weekly, monthly basis. We'll do those in-house. We're masters of the trial procedures because we're the ones that create them. So that also removes a little bit of friction there, where there may be a little bit of a misunderstanding between what's published in the trial procedures and what the licensee knows how to do.
Great. So the idea being is if we get to a field trial and there's a lot of burden on an operator, which the operators in the room, you know what it takes when a field trial is done, and the manufacturers, you know what it takes to ask for that cooperation. And sometimes it gets slow because they don't have the staff, the resources, the time. And as Deputy Chief Lastusky was saying, we know exactly what we want. So the question would be is, do you want to pay extra for that? Do you want to pay the board staff to do it? Now, we got to figure out some staffing issues to be able to move some people over there. But the reason why I'm calling that ante up is basically a toll road. You can stay down the normal road, or if you need to speed things up and you want to pay for a toll road, we will figure out the staff and we'll figure out the cost that you would be paying our lab to do lab work. Now we'll be doing accounting work. And so I don't know, how many you think a year those would be in that scenario? We talking how many?
And that's an interesting question, because we certainly trial more associated equipment than we do with gaming devices. So I don't know what the appetite would be among the industry, but I would imagine most people would want to avail themselves of this, simply because for a lot of these products, it seems like the manufacturers struggle to find a trial location because no one seems to want to take on the extra workload. No one wants to be first. They're interested in the product, they want to buy it, but they don't want to host the trial for it. So go find somebody else, get it approved, and then we'll buy a copy.
Good.
This will sort of remove that from the mix. I think the manufacturers will have a much easier time finding a location to host a trial if their staff there doesn't have to do any additional work beyond, sending us a batch of reports on a weekly basis.
Yeah, Jim Barbie, I would just amplify what John's saying. We recognize that not only you're trying to sell a product, you're trying to sell it with an albatross. You've got to conduct these trial procedures, and we do appreciate those of you out there who are very great at trial procedures. The thought here is, let's take that burden off of you and off the licensee. Let you sell the product. Yes, there are going to need to be some additional reporting requirements. Maybe the licensee has to provide information to us on a daily basis, but we'll do the work on the back end. That's one of the thoughts there. A couple of the other things, as John mentioned, we know the trial procedures will be done correctly from day one. This reduces, for example, a mid-trial walkthrough where we come out and evaluate, are you conducting trial period procedures correctly? But it also allows us to identify deficiencies in real time and get those back so that they can be addressed. And it also allows us to evaluate the current status of the trial. We've heard the term a 30-day field trial. Just for background, 30 days usually encompasses the end of month. That's the reasons behind 30 days. But this allows us to go, are we good at 20 whatever dates, or do we need 42, or whatever the case may be? But we'll be able to make those decisions in real time as well. So this is another initiative that we're excited. Caveat, we can't do it right now with the staffing levels that we have.
Right.
I've mentioned to you at previous AGM meetings, we, the technology division, needs bodies in that space. So we'll appreciate support whenever we start talking about it. We're potentially taking some measures internally to move some positions around so that some more senior agents, senior auditors who can assist us with this. Our audit division has been gracious. They've helped us out in the past. Chief Fremont, she's available on Zoom. She's offered up, if we want to go down this path, and she's got staff available that they'll be able to assist us until we can maybe get in front of the powers that be and actually get bodies in our space.
Yeah, thank you. So it might be a slow ramp up, but again, it's along the same philosophy of we're trying to streamline things. That was a word that Governor Lombardo is using, and we're certainly engaged with that word. If we can streamline something that you all are interested in trying, we may not be able to do all of them on day one, but maybe we start picking up some test cases. So thank you both for that. The next one I want to bring up is what I'm going to call all in, and I will state right on the record, right up front, this is a half-baked idea. So it's not there yet. I don't even know if I have the legal ability to do this, but I've heard you. I mean, I've been here now for 8 months. There's this theory that if the ITL certifies it, Nevada should say it's okay. Okay, I got that. I've been trying to figure out how we get there. And as we get into more of the conversation of today, I'll tell you where the challenges are, and I'll give you a preview of that. It's policy, right? How would an ITL know whether or not Nevada wanted something to be done? And I get as an industry, you all are putting products out, again, across the United States, across the world. And as you have different requirements, it slows things down. So the reason why I'm calling this all in is here's the idea. If we can get to the point where you submit something to an ITL for certification, and if that ITL certifies it and Nevada says, okay, I approve that based on the certification, that will go out. What I'm looking for is I'm going to have to work with the Attorney General's office to be sure I can even do this according to the statutes and the regulations. But if we did, we'd be looking for a test case or two. And let me caveat this. I said this during the last meeting, and I'll say it again. Everybody keeps telling me, don't worry about it. There's not going to be any problems. They're always just software things. Nothing bad's going to happen. All right. I'm going to ask you to put your money where your mouth is. If we approve these test cases, and I have even the right to do this as the chair, we're going to put that out there. We're going to pick a test case or two. And here's the deal. You're going to have to agree as a condition that there is a minimum threshold for a violation. I don't know what that number is today. We'll converse about that, but it's probably $500,000 to $1 million as a minimum threshold, and everything goes up from there. And I'll tell you why, because I don't want to drop something on the operators. I certainly don't want to drop something on the taxpayers, and I don't want to drop something that hurts the reputation of this industry. And I haven't been here long enough to know what those anecdotes are. Gentlemen, do you give me an anecdote where an ITL, not to anything they're doing wrong, they just wouldn't know of, here's the request, they approve it, it hits the floor, and then what bad happens? I'm not talking foot faults. I'm not talking dust on the top of the refrigerator. I'm talking about a significant event that causes bad reputation for the state of Nevada, the inability to collect tax in a proper way, or a unfair gain to the customer. Big deals. Is there something that would be off the top of your head? Sorry to put you on the spot. Is there something that an ITO just wouldn't know about?
I'll maybe give a hypothetical because I don't want to disclose anything that may not be public information. But the ITLs typically test against the technical requirements. They never look to see whether or not something may be permissible under law. So let's just take a hypothetical example of a race and sport system. You've got a cashier's terminal that's used globally. It's one system across the globe. That terminal can process credit cards, may totally be acceptable in another market. It's prohibited under statute here. That feature, unbeknownst to someone in the development or the QA or ITL certification process, may just not be aware of that nuance. That makes it out to the field past our review because it doesn't get submitted to us. And now someone's swiping their credit card at the sports book to place a sports bet.
That'd be a problem. Yeah, that'd be very bad. So somebody uses a credit card in state of Nevada, and how did they do it? They did it because the ITL did an approval US wide. There was probably approved things over here, but Nevada operators weren't supposed to use those. Is that what happens?
Yeah, that's correct. Now, we condition out features all the time that may not be permissible for use here. It's very common with associated equipment, but we put those conditions in when we review the submission that we get post ITL certification. If we're not getting that certification and that submission package before it goes to the field, we're not going to be able to screen for those things before they make it out there. And in general, the consumers and the customers and the people who operate these systems on a day-to-day basis, they don't look at our approval letter. It's typically just not something that gets disseminated widely. So many times they're not even aware of what these approval conditions are. They may log in, see a new feature, assume, well, it's in the system, it must be approved, let's use it.
Got it. Chief, anything come to your mind?
Sure. And I know that the use of a credit card is kind of an extreme example. Substitute credit card for cryptocurrency. That's a real example. We've seen, for example, race and sports pool systems. Maybe they weren't submitted for approval to Nevada. Just I'm aware that there are those that have the ability to take deposits via crypto. From a policy standpoint, that's not something that Nevada supports at this time. That would be more of a relative example if the credit card example maybe is a little far off.
Yeah, that actually is a real world example. And we've seen that in products, not just sports betting products, but we've seen it even on voucher issuance and redemption kiosks that have ATM or check cashing functionality.
Yeah, my guess is you all being in the industry probably have a lot more anecdotes. So we'll talk about that. But again, my half-baked idea is we can do it, but if you want to go all in, we're going to have to condition it. And again, so as I work through the legal abilities to pull that off, we'll chat with you in the industry, talk with AGM, and decide if there's somebody who wants to be the test case on that. And then what I'm really looking for is I'll need all of your help along with the lab's help into figuring out how much time are we really saving? And I've heard a lot of anecdotes about things take too long or Nevada's process is too slow. And if any of you've had private meetings with me in the last 8 months, you've heard me say, I can't fix slow. I don't know what that means, but I can fix if you tell me this is what's going on. And I'm willing to meet with any of you at any time. Open door policy. If any of you met with me, you've heard my philosophy, which is I'm going to get everybody in the same room to save a lot of time, because otherwise, especially when you're talking tech, it's just flying over my head. But if I bring everybody into a room, we can speed things up. So what I'll be interested in is if you guys pick the all in or you pick the ante up or we're going down the ACES road, did we save a month? Did we save 6 months? That's what I'm looking for. I'd love to go back to the governor. Matter of fact, I'd love for you to go back to the governor. He used the word log jam. I'd like for you to go back to him and say, it was a log ride. I love being in Nevada. I jumped on the log ride and we hit the water in 20 minutes. That's our goal here. So I'll be interested in what you all are telling me, how long the process is, and then how many days, how many months, weeks, what are we saving? So those are the 3 ideas off the top of our head that we've been working on for months now. And as I said, we'll get into questions later if you got specific questions, and then we're here every day, 9 to 5 at least, 5 days a week. So don't feel like you have to give us questions today. Next on the agenda, I know Mr. Akers, you had submitted something. Do you want to present that? Patrick, great, good. So you submitted public document for purpose of the meeting, and I believe there were some copies available. So we'll make that part of the record today.
Yeah, so thank you, Chair Hendrick, Member Watkins, Member Assad, Chief Barbie, Deputy Chief Listuski, Patrick Bland, CTO for Acres. I'm excited, right, just based on what I've heard thus far about the ACES initiative, the All-In initiative, and then still waiting on the release notes thing that I don't know, Jim, maybe you will cover that here in a little bit.
Release notes we don't need because we have ACES.
Okay.
ACES trumps release notes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Perfect. Even happier.
We are
So
aces high there.
ACES,
Yeah.
ACES high.
And just to set the record, so we're all here for the lecture on the taxation of financial derivatives in inbound transactions, or is that the lecture hall around the corner? Okay.
Down the hall.
Okay. Cool. So thank you guys for allowing us to be here to present feedback. So Acres, we're kind of the proverbial startup in the brick and mortar gaming industry. And I'm really excited about what's been happening since our conversation or the workshop back in March. We've been working through this process, working with the technology lab to try and bring our products to Nevada. And as part of our conversation today, I just wanted to reframe kind of the goals that we're looking at covering, right? So the modernization of technology approvals and the deployment processes, right, that we've talked about with ACES and the ITL approvals that you guys have already mentioned. And then the other thing that was listed on the notice was the impact of advanced technology on, associated equipment, gaming systems, cashless wagering systems, et cetera. Before we kind of dig into the bright and shiny and thinking about kind of some bold ideas, because I'm loving what I'm hearing right now, let's take a step back. And I think you've mentioned a couple things, Chair Hendrick, about, from a regulatory standpoint, what are the concerns that you guys have in terms of change, right? I'll go ahead and list them out. And if I'm missing anything, let me know. So the first one, in no particular order, player protection, responsible gaming, right? Game integrity. Is the black box doing the things that it was designed to do, right? Because consumers have no insight into how that thing is operating. They just know if they win or lose. Number 3 is the protection of tax revenue in Nevada, right? Are reports being generated properly? Is Nevada collecting what it needs to collect based on the reporting requirements that are here? And I think the 4th one would be, keeping out bad actors in the industry, right? Gaming, we've come a long way in the years that we've been doing this, right? So using the licensing process and all the enforcement mechanisms that are there to eliminate kind of the bad actors that would be part of the industry. Did I miss anything? Okay, those are the big ones, right? And so just a couple things. There's a Thomas Edison quote in here. It ties directly to what we're doing. Like, the value of an idea lies in the using of it, right? And that's what we're talking about today. How can we improve this process so that we can get ideas to market that match and satisfy the regulatory concerns that you guys have, so that we can innovate and grow gaming revenues here in Nevada? So with Acres, kind of the story over the last 2 years is we've gone from, no deployments of our, modern technology to 30,000 slot machines, 1,000 table games in 11 jurisdictions. And one thing that we've learned, this has been the team sport, right? Working with our industry partners as well as our regulator partners. And it's been a challenge, right? So innovation is hard in this industry. And, taking a step back and kind of reflecting on the last 2 years, like, why is that, right? How have we gotten to where we are based on what we've done over the last 30 or 40 years? And I'll take a stab at this, and anybody feel free to add feedback, right? It starts with game integrity, right? The black box, the slot machine, right? We needed a way to make sure that those were fair, that they're safe, that they're doing the things that they were designed to do, right? And so as a byproduct of that, right, we've got ITLs that test them rigorously and ensure that they are doing, in fact, what they were designed to do. And I don't think anybody in here would have any objection to testing of gaming devices. And I know there's a lot of, ideas up here about making that deployment process and approval process easier for gaming devices. And so we've got the black box, the gaming device, and then we have all this associated equipment. And because we've treated from a regulatory standpoint, this is how we need to protect the black box, right? We've kind of come to taken the same line of thought and applied that same regulatory oversight to the associated equipment that surrounds the black box from an operations standpoint, from a value transfer standpoint, where we control source code, where we control versions, where we have to submit to an ITL, where ITL might have to submit to another jurisdiction, right, for approval. And so, and I'm sitting here saying this because I'm thrilled that we're having this conversation, because what we do in Nevada, because you guys are the gold standard, right? How we move forward and be able to embrace technology and innovation doesn't just impact us, it's the whole globe, right? I know we've got the Gaming Institute here, where we have regulators from all over the world coming here to learn about what we're doing. And so with that said, right, how have we gotten here, right? From a regulatory standpoint, we've got the black box, we've got the reporting and all the other things that we treat just like the black box. So could we take a step back and at least ask the question, right? Are there any other regulated industries, right, that have the same types of concerns around customer fairness, transparency, and embrace innovation, right? Could we apply those to gaming? And I think financial services is a really good example of that, right? So, for example, I don't know if anybody in here has ever gone and tried to use their ATM card or debit card to get cash out of an ATM, or use their credit card to go buy pizza and worry about, is that actually going to work? Right? The 300 systems that are powering that transaction, right? Is it going to break down, and am I not going to be able to get my money or utilize it in a manner in which I see what I'm trying to do? I think most of us in here would say no, right? When I go to an ATM, I stick my debit card in, it works, right? When I use my credit card, it works. I know when I was in college, I didn't know if I was going to get any cash out or anything, but, so we've got this inherent trust in the financial services industry, right? The banking industry, right? So we rely on it every day, right? Everything we buy, everything we do, our family relies on it, our children, our retirement. We've got this inherent trust in these institutions, and they're highly regulated, right? You've got FINRA, CFPB, it's like alphabet soup, the Fed Reserve, the State Department of Treasury and Finance, and if they're public companies, like there's additional regulatory requirements that they have to abide by. And so we've got all of this trust, right? Not just because we have to, right? But because we've been using these systems for years. We trust them. And the interesting thing about that is that none of the regulatory regimes concerning financial services control software, right? Control source code. And so, here we are, we're as an associate, and I'm talking purely in associated equipment, not for gaming. We've got all this trust in these systems that allow for innovation. For example, if you go to the slide number 3 or 4, it's got a big tree on it. JP Morgan Chase, big bank. I'm sure a lot of you probably bank with them. They do about $8 trillion of value transfer a day, 52 million transactions a day. 99% of all that is digital. They layer on AI and machine learning, right, to protect against fraudulent transactions, to to protect against anti-money laundering use cases, right? They get to deploy code multiple times a day, whether it be a bug fix, whether it be a feature enhancement to the platform, whether it be an improvement to improve the efficiency of the platform, right? They do not have to submit to an ITL or regulator, right, that they're changing something about their system. And from then kind of taking a step back further, right, think about our securities markets, right? I think the last time I checked, the domestic securities market here in the United States for NASDAQ, everything was about 112 trillion of market capitalization as of July. And none of the annual or quarterly reportings that those companies have to file, none of that technology is controlled, right? There's no regulator saying you must use this system or this system's been approved to generate these reports. And so I love seeing this up here, risk tolerant approach, because when you look at financial services, all the regulatory frameworks that our financial services companies have to abide by, right, follow that risk-based approach. And here we are, and I know one of the big concerns here is audit reporting, right? Is the state collecting the tax revenue that they have? And just taking a step back and us asking the question, does it have to be that way where any change, right, requires an ITL for submission, right? Especially from a reporting and accounting standpoint. And I'm not sitting here advocating for let's get rid of ITLs. I'm not saying that at all, right? We need them, they serve a purpose. But from an ACES standpoint, right, how can we stop letting the regulatory tail drive the innovation dog, right? One example with JP Morgan Chase and just in the financial services industry, in 2010, the quickest way to get money from New York to London was getting on an airplane in JFK with your cash and flying to Heathrow, right? In 11 years, we're now able to transfer value in seconds, right, in any currency we want, right? And that's just been part of the regulatory framework that has allowed for that type of innovation. And so taking a step back, right, what can we learn from them, right? And just like you said in our March workshop, right, how can we bend and not break the rules? If you go to the last page, you guys are stealing some of my thunder here with the ACES initiative and the what was the other one? The ITL approval, right? And so I think from a positioning standpoint, everything in context, it is a privilege to do business in Nevada, right? There's a strict licensing process for manufacturers, or the cash access and wagering instrument service providers for licensees. We want to do business here, right? It's good for our reputation. It's good for our business, right? And we've got the best interests of Nevada. Like, we're trying to do the right thing. And then when you look at some of the other ideas I proposed, right, and we're having the discussion, this is great that we can do this, right? The first thing that would really help, right, would be kind of a novel idea, would be innovation banks, right? Let's talk about a handful of banks at a casino that, if we have no requirement to do ITL testing if it's a novel product, right? No testing from the gaming lab if it's a novel product, right? So we can get it out in the market and see if it's a thing that's worth pursuing or not, right? There's a great, not Socrates, philosopher, Mike Tyson, that once said, everybody's got a plan until you get punched in the face, right? And talk about from just getting products in the field and seeing how they work, right? And don't forget, there's also the market force, the market dynamics. Operators don't want to have players having a bad experience. Operators don't want players coming and bet their house and losing their mortgage and impacting their family, because there's more revenue and more opportunity for them to have a little bit of fun over a number of years. I don't know if you guys have been involved in buying software, enterprise software. Like, we've made this shift from perpetual licensing to subscription-based over the last 10 years because there's more value in the recurring revenue. And so kind of bringing that back to innovation banks, like, how is that going to hurt our ability, right, to continue doing what we're doing, but on a very limited basis, give the operator and their licensed technology partners the ability to try some things, right? It might work, it might not. Moving down to the biannual ITL submissions, kind of falls right in line with the ACES piece, right? This is awesome. I can't wait to see feedback or documentation on that, because that kind of segues into, if we're a licensed operator, right, and we want to deploy a change or add a feature, right, we should have the ability to do so. And then we true up every 6 months, every quarter, right? So totally on the table, whatever Nevada sees fit is a good timing. That could be one idea to help us innovate and bring new features to market and fix things if there's ever any issues. And then kind of last but not least, modular approvals. So going back to the ATM example and what we're doing in the market, modern systems are built to be modular, right? Outcomes require multiple technologies, multiple vendors to deliver a business outcome for a consumer, for an enterprise, right? And we've got this concept of, we've got this big box that does all the things, and that's not really the way that things work anymore, right? And so being able to get approvals for just the functionality that a certain tool or module or service does, right, that could be put together into something bigger.
Thank you very much for that. Good ideas, and yeah, we're on the same philosophical page, so appreciate it.
Cool.
It's devil's always in the details, but like where you're going.
Thank you.
Do you have questions?
Yeah, I do have a question. You made the comparison to the financial industry, and you talked about how the financial industry is highly regulated, but they don't control the software. I guess my question to you is it your understanding that they're making modifications to their systems as often as in the gaming industry, or introducing new products as often?
I think they're doing it more, right? They're deploying code to systems on a daily basis.
Okay.
Right. Adding new features, fixing things with no regulatory approval to be able to accomplish that.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. You want to speak? Please come on up. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Jennifer Carlton, Chief Legal Officer for Sightline Payments. We have been working, I wanted to go next because we've been working with Acres to provide that insight into the payments piece. Obviously, we are a digital payments company, primarily focused on gaming. So this is where we live, is innovating in the payment space for gaming, and everything that Patrick Boyan said. There's like, I don't know if I'm doing that or pull it down.
Yeah.
Is that better?
Is it loose? Go ahead.
Is that better? Okay, yes. Okay.
Go ahead. Sorry about that.
No,
Please.
that's all right. So we've been working with Acres to address some of these issues and provide that perspective on when technology is being deployed at a casino. We have the financial, the fintech side, all of the regulations and the alphabet soup that Mr. Bland mentioned. We have that, plus obviously the gaming side on top of that. And he's absolutely correct that in order to deploy software fixes, updates, there is no prior approval from any of the regulators on the fintech side. That strictly comes from gaming. Now, I will say that it always takes a lot of guts to come up and say the regulators are doing a great job, right, in front of the regulators. But we work very closely, obviously, with Chief Barbie when we have new technology that we want to deploy in Nevada. A preliminary step is always let's determine if there's a control program that's being implicated in anything that we're trying to do. Obviously, if there is, there's certain procedures that we have to go through, but having that ability even to take that first step, you're not going to get that on the non-gaming side, right? But in gaming, we have to have that relationship to be able to make those kinds of assessments on an ongoing basis whenever we're trying to bring anything new to Nevada. So we fully support what Acres is attempting and has proposed. As long as there's ultimately a licensee, right, that's responsible for any of the deployments when they come into Nevada.
Great. Thank you for that. And yeah, I certainly am not afraid to take any suggestions from another industry, especially, the financial institution industry and what they're doing. If we're able to bring that technology over to the gaming industry, it makes perfect sense to me. From a Nevada standpoint, everybody's been copying our regulatory scheme for many decades now, and they've had the opportunity to look at what we've done for decades and actually had the opportunity to say, maybe I don't need all of that. I can get to the same correct answer by doing it faster. So if the financial institutions are doing it better than we are, absolutely, we look forward to meeting with them and seeing if it works under our regulatory scheme.
Yeah, I mean, so one example would be on the fintech side, every time you download an app, you're going to have certain opt-out provisions, certain privacy provisions. There's all sorts of federal regulations that we have to adhere to if we are a money services business, right? Let alone transferring funds, but just, any kind of money services business. But there's no layer of approval from either the feds or the state that would make sure that you have those opt-out provisions, that you have all of those privacy concerns addressed, all of those various regulations, that comes from obviously you having to do that, and the likelihood that you're either going to be fined or sued, right, if you fail to adhere to those provisions, because of course there are always individuals that could file a class action. There are certainly financial institutions that have been fined or censured for failure to adhere to those requirements, but there is no prior approval. So that's the distinction I think that Acres was raising as well, that there's a self-policing sort of element to fintech that obviously doesn't exist in gaming.
Interesting. Thank you.
Chairman, if I may,
Yeah.
I'd like to ask, or Jennifer's comments, Ms. Carlton's comments played right into my question or comment was going to be, in the financial industry, if you violate, there's hefty fines.
Sure.
Correct? This plays into your all-in approach. Yes, there's still approval there, but maybe it's more of an abbreviated approval with there being penalty.
Yeah, that's what'll happen is if you see less of our employees in the technology lab division working on approvals, you can guess where they're going to go. They're going to go where the fintech people go, which is they become enforcement side, compliance side. And if things move out fast, you just got people checking to see, are they okay? We hope we don't find anything, but in a regulated industry like this, I think everybody in this room, everybody watching this would agree that good regulation, effective regulation is extremely important for this entire industry. Otherwise, you invite, as we were mentioning, bad characters, you invite federal regulation, you invite all kinds of things that if we don't cooperatively self-police who gets inside these gates, then somebody else will do it. And if we don't check the things on the front end, they're going to have to check them on the back end, which is, I assume, what financial institutions do with all the federal oversight of the alphabet.
And the other element to recall is that in order to even put any kind of product into the market in a non-gaming sense, you have to go through Apple and the Microsoft as well. You have to go through their rules. I mean, I don't know the last time you looked at that, but it's 92 pages from Apple of all of the necessary criteria in order to put an app out on an iPhone. So and they're very strict, obviously, for their own reasons. So there is the self-policing is very real for technology and especially in the fintech space.
Mm-hmm. Great. Thank you. Appreciate it. And I know that Mr. Dorsey and Mr. Reeser want to present something today. So, gentlemen, if you're prepared, please step up to the mic.
Yeah.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, Member Watkins, Member Assad, Madam Secretary, board chiefs and staff, and members of the Deputy Attorney General's office. For the record, I'm Darren Dorsey, Executive Director of AGEM, the Association of Gaming Equipment Manufacturers, the Global Gaming Suppliers Industries Trade Association.
Our Dan Reeser of Kenmore, appearing on behalf of AGEM.
Just as a high level, we're here today following up on the conversations we had in March and the number of ones that we've had in the intervening months with you, with staff, with other board members about this very topic. But we're obviously very interested in this, and it's very, we take it a positive that we're having this conversation just because there's been a decade where sometimes we weren't having this conversation. So it's a good thing. More importantly, I think that you said something very at the beginning, Mr. Chairman, that the whole goal of this, if you ask from the regulated and suppliers, manufacturers, is how do we get to yes on a particular piece of a question, a product, or process? And that should be the goal, because any of those people coming through that queue own a privilege license in Nevada. And the people that spoke before me, that's a privilege. That's something that our companies respect, rely upon, and that's a cooperative and a collaborative relationship that we always want to have with our regulatory authorities. But more importantly, in those meetings that you talked about, you alluded to it earlier, we have had this conversation about, okay, give me some other concrete examples. Give me some other places about why does Nevada simply take longer? Is it because we can't do certain things? Do we not have the statutory authority to do them? Or our regulations not the right? And it's been a lot of back and forth. But we took some of those comments to heart, and rather than focusing on saying, hey, if you look at Massachusetts, who doesn't have a secondary, doesn't have a lab, relies on the ITL framework for this, or in Michigan, we wanted to kind of step back and say, let's stop doing apples and oranges comparison. And what could we do in Nevada with the existing regulatory and legislative framework? And what could, in doing that, put a plan together, which I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Reeser shortly, is then what would almost get us aligned with what those ideal jurisdictions, to put it back where you talked about, of being first or at the front of the line when it comes to the speed and pace that we can get product technologies deployed, regulated, and approved here in Nevada. So we're happy to have this conversation. It's great from Chief Barbie's perspective, I know, and the lab, those ideas, those concepts, some members of the industries have already talked about that. These are great constructive concepts, and we want to keep driving that forward to see where we can continue to improve, because the goal of this is that how do we make Nevada, not how other places do it, how do we make Nevada the best? And that's what we want to be part of that conversation, what we're here to talk about today. So with that, I'll turn it over to Dan Reeser.
Good afternoon, Chairman, members of the board, staff. Dan Reeser with Fenimore. Before I review the specific proposal that's before you, I think it's important for the board members and staff to understand the lens through which AGEM has conducted the evaluation and formulated the recommendations, because the lens is pretty important. We first made two major assumptions. The first is that the board and the commission have as their objective to maintain a best-in-class regulatory environment for technology, as with everything. And second, that in 2023, the board and the commission understand that the Nevada market represents only a small proportion of the global demand for technology products and services provided by your licensed manufacturers and distributors. Now, the board has suggested in discussions that the starting point for the evaluation of technology approval processes is a comparison of practices from other jurisdictions that are considered comparable. We have thought about that long and hard and discussed it amongst the working group that's been deployed on this at AGEM. And unfortunately, I have to say we categorically reject that approach. While we can talk about Massachusetts.
Let me stop you there.
Yeah.
All I've heard since before I took this job was Nevada is slower than other jurisdictions. I've heard that so many times, and this state does it faster, or these states do it faster. Nevada is the slowest. Nevada's the last. So that question you just presented, Mr. Reeser, is coming from what I heard. And all I'm asking back to that question is, can you tell me in a concrete example of why Nevada would be, and I used this word earlier, slower? If you don't like the question, that's fine, but nobody gets to raise it again.
So, Mr. Chairman, in a moment, I think as I go through my presentation, I'll get to where you're talking about.
Good.
But what I have said is have to reject that the process of deciding how we change in Nevada can't be driven by what other states do. They have different statutory schemes. They have different objectives. And so spending a lot of
I'm going to sit here in the choir pit and you go ahead and you preach, because that's exactly what I've been saying. I've been saying all along.
Yep.
Can you tell me what these other states are doing? Because I don't know. And now you're going to tell me they're doing it different.
Well, they do it, and they do some of it
Go
different.
ahead.
So
I'll try not to interrupt.
So
Please.
our view is that the debate needs to move away from whether a practice in another jurisdiction is or is not relevant or irrelevant, because what we've heard in discussions with you, in many instances, they're not comparable. For over a decade, not my first rodeo with my first board on this issue, the board has argued, and in many instances, maybe validly, that there are processes that are driven by unique Nevada requirements for technology. A leading example we hear and have heard for years is the method by which you track and record data about gross revenue, as an example. Thus, spending a lot of time and effort in coming up with a recommendation for you today, looking at jurisdictional comparison approaches, we viewed as not advancing the ball. The objective of evaluating modernization of technology processes is not just to do enough or just as good as another jurisdiction. The goal has to be that Nevada is put as at the forefront as best in class. Also, in context of what has been heard for over a decade, the board has historically defended its processes by focusing on how the industry wants to very specifically change a particular procedure, task, or approach. And in those discussions, the board, whether we agree, can articulate reasons why it does what it does and why it needs to do that. And once identified, the discussion kind of gets into a debate over whether that procedure, task, or approach is necessary or should be compromised in some way. For those reasons, the working group at AGEM believe the discussion on modernization and reform has to be recalibrated. The industry should simply recommend what is the best of class duration for board and commission action on different types of requests or applications made under Regulation 14, under existing scheme. Let me repeat that. So what we're going to talk about in a moment is not how you do it, what procedure you want to do, but the duration that you take to do it. And in each of these instances, we are only talking about those situations where there is an ITL certification. So we're not talking about somebody who skips that process for some reason, can't use that process for some reason. That's going to be a case-by-case basis if there's not an ITL certification. The working group came to the conclusion that it doesn't need to recommend what procedure or process the technology division should employ among the tools that are there in the existing regulation. That's your business. what you feel you need to do, what your risk profile is. You have the tools, they're all in Regulation 14 in spades. What needs to be discussed is what is the appropriate number of days to complete whatever regulatory process the board decides to implement for the particular type of technology. Now I'm going to say this is similar to another rodeo I used that I had to ride, which was in front of the Nevada legislature, which dealt with complaints from the public utilities industry about how long it took to process a rate case and to approve a merger amongst major utilities. Couldn't get relief from the regulator, went to the legislature, and they easily said, not a problem. You'll process a rate case in 210 days, or the rates go into effect. You will approve the merger in 180 days, or it's deemed approved. And the Public Utilities Commission is not the only agency in the state of Nevada that is subject to those kinds of either self-discipline or discipline imposed from outside. Legislative guidelines are routinely imposed on Nevada agencies. I'll give you a few examples. The insurance commissioner has to approve holding company changes in 60 days. A school district has to approve or disapprove a charter school in 60 days. And the Commissioner of Financial Institutions has 60 or 90 days, respectively, to approve a merger of a depository institution, that's 2 banks, or investigate a trust company's application for licensing. The State Transportation Board has 30 days to decide whether to vacate a public road, 30 days. And the state engineer, with all of the procedures and policies that are in Chapter 533, has only 240 days to decide after it conducts a hearing whether to take somebody's water right away or give somebody a different priority in appropriation. I give you those examples just so it's not a novel concept that agencies are subject to or impose upon themselves deadlines. So agency hubris aside, none of those regulatory examples I just gave you are less important, and some, frankly, I think more critical than the board's approval of gaming technologies. These other agencies also perform, I submit to you, because I practice in front of them, those constraints with far fewer resources than you have, and with the impediment of the Nevada Administrative Procedures Act, which imposes all kinds of restrictions, public hearings, contested cases, motion practice. None of that is part of approving technology. That's the lens. Now I want to talk to you about the recommendations. And I'm not going to read the chart to you. What I've done is I've taken what's in the chart and I've boiled it down into categories because there are unifying elements here. I too was excited to hear about ACEs, anti-F, and all-in. And nothing we are proposing changes those kinds of initiatives. Those kinds of initiatives would be initiatives used by the board to meet the duration times that we are recommending. So we're going to look at 18 different processes used by the board for technology approvals. And for each of those processes, there has to be, as I said, an ITL certification for the technology. And we've prescribed a number of days for the board to take processing decisions and approve the technology or reject it. The number of days we have prescribed were reviewed and discussed at length by a working group representing HM members. And in that process, we talked about what other states do. But at bottom, what we decided was to recommend numbers of days based on what we believed would set the most efficient and the most predictable among most, if not all, jurisdictions, it would move Nevada, we believe, to the head of the class. Importantly, AGEM's recommendation do not, as I want to reiterate, tell the technology division or the NC or the board when or when not to do a field trial, when or when not to inspect a device. We're not getting into that. And for the reasons I indicated, we are only recommending prescribed duration times for action steps. So let me take a few additional minutes to provide an overview of our recommendations. For new gaming devices and ILSs under Reg 14030, accepting a time for a field trial, if directed, the board's approval process would be completed in 28 days. The board chair would have to approve or object within 15 days of receiving the application. If an objection is made, that objection must identify all required corrective action. The applicant has 10 days to make and submit the corrections. The board then either has to deny the application because the corrections didn't hit the mark, or within 3 days thereafter, it's deemed approved. So if you take no action, it's deemed approved in 3 days. If you object, if you believe the mark has been missed in the corrective action, you deny that application. You can go through this process 2 or 3 times. In the same time period, we're doing it today by extension after extension after extension. For device modifications, again, excepting where a field trial is directed, these would be completed in 18 days. There's a 5-day approval and objection period by the chair. If the board chair objects, again, the corrective action has to be specified. The applicant has 10 days to make the corrections. If the corrections hit the mark, you do nothing, and 3 days later it's approved, or you deny it because the corrective action wasn't taken. For new games or game variations, we're not talking about gaming devices now, we're talking about table games that have received an ITL certification. A similar processing time is recommended. We suggest 10 days to approve or object. Objections, again, are specified in writing. The applicant has 10 days to cure, and unless a field trial is directed, the same 3-day either denial or it goes to market time period applies. If the technology is subject to a field trial, if the technology subjected to this process requires a hearing approval under 14-100 or 14-250, it's placed on the next succeeding month agenda of the board and the commission. And we suggest, and we believe it can be done, it's by a consent. Just the following products that have to have statutory approval or regulatory approval are on consent. And unless a board member or a commissioner objects and asks for there to be a hearing, it's just approved on a consent agenda. Now, in the context of, and we recommend that same process for gaming devices, AE, or anything else that has to go to the board or the commission in public hearing. We have made some recommendations for games that the current submission requirements that the enforcement division have be modified or eliminated if there's an ITL certification. And we specify those in the table for the enforcement division's consideration. With regard to associated equipment, so this is going to be a pattern here. It's a comparable procedure. There's filing of a request for approval, and within 10 days of the application or request, the board chair has to approve or object. Objections have to be identified with specificity in a correction action manner. And if a direct field trial is going to be required, the number of transactions that must be evaluated, which should be specified, so that that process doesn't get tacked on down the way. Additionally, we're suggesting that if there's a 3-day audit required, that the field trial process be eliminated. You don't need to do both a field trial and a 3-day audit process. The working group thought that those had become now duplicative, and we're open to hearing that we're wrong about that. But the thought was, if you were going to require a 3-day audit process, the time required for that didn't need to be tacked on to a field trial. AE modifications would be subject to a 7-day approval or objection period. If the board chair objects, again, all corrective action must be specified. The applicant must submit corrections within 10 days. And then unless you deny the application because the corrective action wasn't a sufficient cure, then 3 days later, it's approved automatically. With regard to physical inspections of devices and software under 14070, 075, 120, and 270, these are now to be completed within 10 days for a device modification and an ILS. 15 days for new devices and 17 days for associated equipment. We calibrated those days based on where we understand the problem areas are, or the areas where the board's concerns about revenue calculation, fairness of the game, those types of things needed a few more days to be completed. They were also selected to sync with the total process periods that we've already recommended for those categories of technology, so they could be completed within those time periods, and consistent with the waiver or objection period, which ranges from 5 to 7 days, and an inspection period that would be between 5 and 15 days, all related to and depending on the type of technology. Now on to field trials. For those field trials in situations not addressed by your notice 2023-65 dated August 22nd, we're recommending that field trial process add no more than a total of 55 days to technology approvals. And this would sync well to the recommendation Chief Barbie made about bringing in-house the review of financial information to take that. I agree with him, that burden of trying to find the operator who wants to put up with this and dedicate those resources. We are recommending that under Reg 140080, 130, 240, and 280, that within 5 days of the approval application or request being submitted, the board chair elects or waives the field trial requirement. So you've got the application, you decide within the first 5 days, am I going to make this go to field trial or not? So that is a predictable part of the process moving forward. If the field trial is directed, the objectives and reasons for the field trial should be specified, and where applicable, the number of transactions that must be evaluated must be specified. If the trial, once the trial is set, it must be conducted and completed in 45 days. And once completed, the board chair has 5 days to approve or deny the application or request. If the technology subjected to the trial must have a hearing approval before the board and the commission, it would advance on that same fast track to consent calendar. Finally, at page 13 and 14 of our handout, We're recommending a procedure that replaces the current pre-application process used by the technology division, where consultation and white papers seem to add weeks and months to the technology approval process before a licensee can even file an application or a request. We are not eliminating that process. If a licensee wants to use the consultation white paper process, you can do that. But we also are recommending a alternative, simplistic, simplified, maybe not simplistic, process that would sidestep that consultation delay. If the licensee doesn't want to use consultation, they submit the application applicable to what they have evaluated the regulated product to be subject to, what statute or regulation they believe it is subject to. Instead of the debate about whether it's this or that, the licensee picks a horse and rides it. They get an ITL certification for that type of product. They submit the application to the board. The board chair has 7 days to object to the application or the request. Hey, this isn't AE, this is a cashless wagering system within that 7 days. So there's predictability up front as to what it's going to be categorized as. If there's no objection in that 7 days, the application goes through the processes that we've already outlined with you applicable to that type of technology. If there is an objection, the board says, no, it's not a red widget, it's a blue widget. You need to submit this under that regulation. Then the applicant manufacturer has to go to the ITL and get the certification for the blue widget, not the red widget, and then come back and submit it to you in the process that you said was the correct process. No, and I've gone through the white paper process. I'm not criticizing it, but no 6 months to get a white paper through. Manufacturer can ride a horse, and if they're wrong, you tell them they're wrong. And it's our recommendation that once the board has said, file it as a blue widget, not a red widget, that the doctrine of equitable estoppel would apply to you. You can't now say, oh, wrong, it's a yellow widget. You've picked which regulated product silo you want it processed under. And that is what the manufacturer's now gone back and gotten an ITL certification for. In that situation, then, having resubmitted it with the right kind of blue widget ITL certification, all of the procedures we've already outlined would apply as to duration. I know that was a lengthy summary, but it was better than going through, I think, cells on a table, which might cause somebody to want to go to sleep more than hearing me might make you want to go to sleep. I'm happy to answer any questions and realize this is a lot to immediately digest.
First of all, Mr. Reeser, let me just say that I'm always impressed with what you put together, and there's no doubt that you and Mr. Dorsey and AGM have spent an incredible amount of time on this, and I personally thank you for that. That's what I've been looking for. I've been looking for something concrete that we can dig into, and that's the framework you've given us. I've got quite a few questions I wrote down, but before I jump into those or anybody else jumps into them, why don't we take a 10-minute break for everybody? And let's take a 12-minute break. Let's come back at 2:45 and we'll get into the questions. Thank you. All right, so let's go back on the record. Again, thank you, Mr. Reeser, Mr. Dorsey, and your entire group for putting this together.
Chair, before you ask
yes.
a question, point of personal
Please.
privilege to add one other thing that I meant to say at the beginning. In formulating our recommendations, we have attempted, there may be, the Attorney General's office may disagree, but we have attempted to avoid the need. We know we don't need any statutory changes. We don't believe there are any regulatory changes either. Judge Assad asked me that. As you know from discussions you and I've had, that's kind of my frame of reference. So no regulation needs to be changed. We haven't changed what a commission says has to be in an application or what kind of thing you have to give an approval for. And we believe everything falls within the discretion designated in the existing Reg 14, either for the chair of the board or for the board as a whole to make that decision.
Good. Yeah, I appreciate that. And that was kind of what we've been talking about over the past several months is if we're going to make change, can we do it sooner rather than later? Statutory is 2 years away. Regulatory, you may be talking months away. But if there's a framework right now that we can work within, I appreciate you having that mindset to go forward. I also appreciated your term of best in class. And I was joking with you a little bit. We've known each other for a very, very long time. And when I'm talking about preaching to the choir, the phrase I did keep hearing was Nevada's just last and Nevada's slow. And why is it out in these other jurisdictions? And I'm glad that we're past that. We're not talking about Nevada versus anybody else. And it's no disrespect to them or no disrespect to the state of Nevada. They shouldn't be compared to us. We shouldn't be compared to them. We should all be compared to the best we can possibly be, right? So I like the idea of what you're talking about in terms of we're going to compare Nevada to the best it can be and as fast as it can be in a true regulatory framework. We have a statutory mandate to be regulating this industry. If you got rid of us, somebody would figure out how to regulate the industry. It wouldn't just be, we'll just do it ourselves. We're a tax collection agency, right? So we got to be sure that the tax collected is proper. And we want to be sure that the visitors who come to Nevada and the citizens of Nevada are ensured that they have a fair game. So I think we're all on starting with that page. I'll jump into a couple questions I had here. Let me ask you first off, put your regulator hats on. Just getting this today and hearing about all these timelines. If you had your regulator hat on, where do you think this falls down? Where does the system break if you got all these deadlines in place?
So I want to make sure I'm understanding your question. You're assuming that our recommendations have been accepted?
Correct.
And where does the problem arise?
Yeah. What happens in the real world once this gets going? Worst case scenario, you're a lawyer. That's what we talk about. And what's the worst thing that could happen? But being a regulator, protecting the state of Nevada and the gaming industry, what goes wrong if you have all these hard deadlines?
So we thought about that and discussed it. And this is where the rub occurs. But the rub is not on you. The rub is on the industry. If you get to the end of the timeframes that we've given on each of this, and there's a 3-day deemed approved facing you, and you have doubts, you deny the application. And the point I was trying to make is personal experience with clients. I could, as I explained to the working group, could file 3 such applications for some kinds of products and face 2 denials. And if it's a 28-day turnaround, I'm happy to do that all day long until I get my approval, as opposed to wait. I mean, we have a regulation that says, well, we'll pull a plug on a field trial if it hits 270 days. What? There's so many problems, so many issues with it that we're going to go it out 270 days. If it can't be field trialed in 45 days successfully, then deny it. Tell us why you're denying it, and we'll come back.
Yeah, and then you were kind of
So I think that's the safety valve.
yes.
And we talked about that safety valve. Obviously, the safety valves for you didn't tell me something or you misrepresented something are the same as they are today. You're a licensee, you deceived me, you misrepresented, you have all those obligations under Reg 404, and you're going to get whacked for that. So that doesn't change it, but that's the lay of the land as we exist today.
Yeah. Do you believe that the timelines on the board would cause, let's say the board has 7 days, but the manufacturer is not getting back to the board's question during days 4, 5, and 6? Or do you believe everything on all your timelines, there's a hard start and the board has all the information it's got, which, by the way, I can tell you that's never happened. There's always questions. So what I wouldn't want to have is the clock ticking on the board and not getting prompt answers.
The 5-day, 7-day, 10-day accept the application or request or object is kind of a 1-0. I accept the application. It is for the right thing, and everything is here. Objection is, you didn't tell me this, you didn't tell me that. So during that objection, approve or accept period, there's not a need for dialogue. That's your time to decide. It's a complete application. I have everything I need. If there are deficiencies, then you object and you specify what the deficiencies are, and that may include information that should have been in the application, or it may be, this ITL certification departs from our script in this respect. Fix that. And then the time period for the licensee is similarly short to go fix. And that's one of the other areas where we discussed, and that is putting on us the same kind of task we're putting on you. And if we can't get it done in that time period, there's either got to be a discussion about how we're going to process this application, or there has to be a denial, and I refile with all my thoughts put together correct. And that's a fair, in our view, that's a fair quid pro quo between the industry and the board.
Sure. There's got to still be communication, I guess is my point.
Sure.
Yeah.
But we're not trying to have you have to do that in that objection approved period. That's what I've given you my objections. Now the clock's on you.
Gotcha. Yeah, and I know this is all written with board chair, which always says board chair or designee. This sounds almost like a full-time job for the chair, one of the board members, or an ombudsman has to be created. Do you know how many of these do you think would come through? And maybe I need to ask Chief Barbie or Mr. Dorsey, how many are we talking about on a weekly basis, a monthly basis, or you're on the clock for 5 days, 7 days, 10 days?
So I think Chief Barbie probably is the better keeper of those statistics, because we haven't gone to every AGEM member and tried to accumulate the statistics of how much is coming in to the lab in each category of the 18 categories. I'm frankly not assuming when we put board chair in our recommendations, it's because that's the way the regulation's written. It doesn't say chief of technology will. It says the board chair. Of course, you're going to delegate that to Chief Barbie or somebody else to be doing that review. No reflection on you as chair, but I'm not sure you should be deciding whether the AE is whether a piece of software is or is not compliant.
You're not hurting my feelings.
I certainly wouldn't do it if I were sitting in your chair.
To your point, though, I think you're right. Chief Barbie, I know you're just hearing this today, but my question being, is this a new full-time job? Could the chief of technology even do this? Is there that many of these if you're on a hard deadline? Or is, fill us in on what you think this time requirement would be.
Is there if I write something?
Yeah. Just be sure we can hear you. Hey, Zeus, be sure that you're picking him up on mic.
So before I get started, I'll state for the record, I'm all for being held accountable. I don't mind, putting times on
Thank you.
things.
Perfect. Thank you.
It's going to conflict with my my artistic endeavor here. But I would like to share. I'd like to share with you a few numbers, and I appreciate the effort and thought that you guys put into what you've come forward with. I look forward to the opportunity. Maybe we discuss this a little bit more. I'd like to give you some information maybe you take back that will help facilitate those discussions in the future. So I'm going to put a couple of numbers up here, and these are from 1/1/2020 to present, approximately to present. And these are numbers for background, for discussion, maybe off by 1 or 2, but generally these are our numbers. So for AE, we've processed 732 mods. For gaming device mods, we've processed 3,548. The timeline for those, and then my numbers I can easily track mods. They're pretty straightforward, but I think a lot of what you're talking about addresses mods themselves. So our numbers for this look like, if we were to look at the steps in the process of just a modification, there's the ITL, there's the manufacturer, and then there's the GCB. So if I were to look at these 3 times, this is what our numbers look like. The average time spent, and this is for all of these, regardless of complexity, we just lumped it all in. It's just to drive discussion. But our average time for the ITL is 43 days. The average time it takes a manufacturer to submit a product between the time the ITL certifies it to a submission is 11 days. And then our numbers for gaming device mods are 3.93 days. And for associated equipment, for 5.24. These are our current turnaround times. So a lot of the times that you've mentioned, they're a little bit greater than the times that we're already performing. Now, it's a little more difficult to come up with numbers for new. This is easily 90% of what we do are gaming device modifications. There are new gaming devices, excuse me, new gaming devices. I think we've done 12 in the last 3 years. 14 devices total since 2020. I apologize, I don't have turnaround times for those. For associated equipment, I only have the stats for this year readily available. We've done 14 new. Those are things that have gone to a field trial, and the average field trial length is 99 days for those. The reason that a field trial would go 99 days is there was my term hitching to get along somewhere along the way. But I wanted to just frame our discussion on this is where we're currently at, so that when we do get together in the future, and I'm not suggesting take it from 7 days to 3, which I saw your gears spinning there. I'm not suggesting that, but I think we're largely there for the bulk of our operations.
Yeah, thank you for that. I was actually going to ask you too, Chief, when you heard these timelines, what kind of word would you put on it? Would you say this was aggressive? Would you say
I think Kurt comes to mind.
Current?
Kurt, yeah.
Kurt, yeah, fast.
Yeah.
Let me ask you guys the same question. When you built this, based on those stats, or maybe it's the 10% outliers, if we're talking about that's 90%, maybe it's the 10% outliers, would you say this was reasonable? Would you say this was aggressive? What would you say these timelines are for Nevada to accomplish?
So first of all, as to the statistics that Chief Barbie provided, those are mods, not all of the other types of technology that we've identified.
So would we say that's the
So
10%, just so I'm clear?
I don't know that we know like he knows.
Yeah. Well, let me stop
percentage
you and
of-
ask, when you said this is kind of 90%, because we're talking mods, is the 10% the other, which Mr. Reeser's talking about?
Yeah, the 10%.
Okay. Okay. So
Okay.
yeah, trying to
So-
get everything in one bucket. Good.
What we discussed was, because Chief Barbie has shared with us previously some of the information, not to the decimal point, but we use those as frame of references, and in some instances we doubled it because we're not trying to. One of the things that we're not trying to do is, which there had been some discussion, let's have a bunch of workshops where we take associated equipment and call it, vanilla, chocolate, and pistachio, and come up with a different process for each one. We had a long discussion of that. We said, no, let's just set a date as a number of days we think reasonable for everything that falls into one of these 18 buckets.
So reasonable, you think? So we're doable, reasonable, based on looking at you added time. You didn't put it at the bare bones.
No, what we did was we took what we thought was we started with a reasonable guess that came from council, and then there was input on no, that you're going to have to add 3 days to that, or it never takes that long. If anywhere else, cut that by 5 days. Those kinds of discussions. Did we talk about where it takes 5 days less? No, we didn't get into trying to compare the jurisdictions. We just took information as to setting those. Again, when it got to whether it was aggressive or not aggressive, the safety valves were put in so that if it is too aggressive, then there's likely to be a denial before the third day, right? And so that was the approach.
So let me ask you this then.
Mr. Dorsey can kick me under the table and/or correct me.
Probably will.
No, it'll be the parking lot discussion. If you were to come back and say on this part of the 10% for this kind of product, we need 5 more days. I suspect that falls within expectation of this discussion. If you were to come back and say we need 250 more days, we'd go, well, then we're not really moving the ball down the court.
So let me ask you a different question. As you built this, and I appreciate all the thought that went into, we thought how long it's taken now. We tried to add in some buffer. We got safety valves. Did you think that this system will save time for the manufacturers in the global sense? 25% of the time involved in getting a product on the floor, 50%? Or did you have that discussion about what was the goal to speed up?
So we did not have a specific discussion of how many days do you think you get to market faster. What we had a discussion, and Mr. Dorsey can amplify, what we did have a discussion of is if these timeframes, these durations were adopted by the board, would this significantly change the needle for you that the first place you went to get the product approved was Nevada? And that was largely the consensus. There might be some places that'll cut it off by 3 or 4 days or even 2 weeks for a specific product. But the one thing that I think the working group concluded was the benefit here is if this kind of a matrix were adopted, there is predictability. I know up front that I'm going to take 28 days to do this, and I'll either have an approval or I won't have an approval after 28 days. And if I don't get it, I'm going to have to go back through the process. So, pardon my French, I'll damn sure make sure that when I put that application in, it's ready to fly.
I would also add, Mr. Chairman, along with those lines, there are going to be commercial considerations that always come into play for a particular product or a particular launch. The point about this conversation was, what do we do to put Nevada up in the front of that line and gets it in that conversation to where the process that's there isn't an impediment to putting Nevada in that front of the line. And this is something that's there that people thought, yes, that does help. That does help us move that release strategy, full launch strategy, all those types of deployment strategy, those types of issues that would help include Nevada in that conversation first. And what Dan referred to also is predictability and timeliness are important considerations for everything, because time sometimes is a very difficult enemy when it comes to that particular, especially when you're having disparate time periods between products being launched and deployed in different places at much larger periods of time. You have code issues, you have updates that are coming in there, and you have version control problems, those things. So the longer that gap exists, the further and further apart it gets, it has a larger impact on your business. So briefly, that's the thing in putting this together, was this is something that would help us and would move the needle for us in those considerations as a group.
I just want
Go
to
ahead.
add briefly, when Ms. Dorsey says commercial considerations, one of those is I may have gotten a casino in Detroit to agree to buy 500 units. I can't sell. Nobody in Nevada wants to buy it. So I'm going to submit to Michigan first, even though it may not be faster or maybe the same amount of time. That's another commercial consideration that frequently manufacturers face.
Do you believe that doing this, does it change the focus from ITL certification equals we're ready to get Nevada stamp of approval and hit the floor? Or is that baked into these time parameters?
Baked in.
Yeah.
It is baked in on purpose, because none of these recommendations apply unless you have the ITL certification. So the concept of ITL approval equals Nevada approval, well, it doesn't equal, but it gets you to the point where these predictable time periods apply.
Board members, do you have questions? I'm sure I've got some more, but feel free if you got questions.
So first and foremost, thank you for your very detailed solution or offering of a solution. My concern is that if we go by this process where it's deadline driven, duration driven, and we're objecting to or rejecting certain widgets, as you call them, that the complaint from the industry will then be, well, the board's not talking to us. They're not having those ongoing communications with us about our products like we have been doing. So how would you respond to that?
I don't think what we are suggesting, well, I know what we are suggesting is not to change the process or the relationship that the lab currently has with the manufacturers over regular consultation and discussion. And, like Tuesday is XYZ company's day at 10 o'clock. We're not suggesting any change in that. And far as discussions, we're not changing the ability of a manufacturer to have those discussions up front if they want to. But if they don't view that as productive or necessary, or they don't view that as conducive or the best approach for them for some reason, this process would allow them to trigger it by filing the application and charging ahead within that time frame. They may decide to have some lengthy discussion with the technology division before they file that application. All of these timeframes are triggered by the filing of either a request or an application as termed in the specific regulation. Doesn't talk about what happens before that.
Okay, I think that makes good sense because, like, as I was noting before, if we have these tight deadlines to turn things around, those conversations can't happen to the extent that they were happening previously, right? If we have 7 days to turn something around, we can't have those extensive conversations. And the widget is submitted according to a particular regulation as opposed to another. So we can't have that conversation. Well, it doesn't belong in this regulation. It belongs in this regulation. That was my concern. But if you're saying, you can still have those conversations before and then decide to file the application later. But now my concern, I guess, is shifted a little bit to a capacity concern, a resource concern for us in that, are we going to be able to have those conversations before, in addition to turning around deadlines in the way that they're
Yeah, one of the words that maybe I used the wrong word a moment ago, but bureaucratic comes up. I think about this process in that we're going to be focusing on deadlines instead of collaborating with, I think I'm taking your communication comment, give you the example now, a modification comes in, we have some questions on it. We ask you, you go ask the engineer. That's a back and forth process until we're all, okay, we're good. We don't disapprove it at that point. We don't reject it at that point. We are working with you to get the yes at that point. So I would be a little concerned from a capacity standpoint that we're not going to have people to review thoroughly, get the notice out. I'm assuming we wouldn't be necessarily doing, maybe we continue to do that, but we're going to find ourselves up against the clock in all of this where we have to render a decision. And if we haven't gotten information we need, then we stop the clock. I apologize, Dan, I forgot the terms that you used. Now it goes back to them, to the manufacturer, to handle whatever the objectives were. We're going to need to have a project manager whose job is solely to track where are all of these in the process. So this it definitely will require some additional overhead to what we currently do just to track all the timelines of everything.
Yeah, but otherwise, I think this is a great idea. It's, as the term the chair used was revolutionary, but I think it's a great idea otherwise.
Judge, do you have questions?
Thank you, Chairman. Great package here, this recommended regulation 14 process changes, as it's titled. A ton of time and effort went into it. Very thoughtful. It's excellent. I commend you both for producing this. With respect to the big picture, a couple of analogies come to mind. When Boeing, the airplane manufacturer, wanted to modify the 737 or 787? 737, right? They wanted to come out with the MAX. They had some major problems. And they're under tremendous regulation by the FAA. So what did they do? They fixed them. And a couple of planes went down first. They got sued big time. So there's always that check and balance on what we're doing here, what manufacturers are doing. There's the Trial Lawyers Association, it's called. And they will step in and they will make sure you get that product right, or they're going to sue you from here till kingdom come. It's that simple. We have some other examples too. With other manufacturers, we have the cyber breach that just happened recently. This class action lawsuit's flying. They're alleging that, well, you didn't have enough protection. You didn't have enough security protocols in place at the beginning. You didn't do enough after the fact to mitigate the situation. So there are plenty of checks and balances on the casino industry with respect to cyber attacks. There are going to be plenty of checks and balances here on new products, on modified products, new games, whatever the situation is. These timelines that were put up on the board here, they're less than what you're recommending. So I don't see a problem there. You're giving us more time. And if there's a problem with what the chairman indicated from his first question that, well, what if he has an objection and he doesn't get a response from the industry in a timely fashion? I think that can be told. It can just simply told until he gets the information. And then that 7-day period could run. We could put that in there very easily if it's not already in there. So I think that everything here is producing a framework from which we can move forward. I love it. I think it's fantastic. It's overdue. And I commend you for putting this before us.
Let me ask you, Mr. Reeser, can you put this in a linear timeline? Would it fit in something that says these are the types of approvals or applications we've submitted, and this is a running timeline? Would it work that way, or is it too complicated?
If I understand the question, Chair, you're saying could the narrative here
It's
be
more for just me understanding.
changed to a timeline that says this happens on this date, this happens 7 days later, or?
No, it's more for me to just understand it, to wrap my mind around it. I'm thinking visually, this is day one, this is what's got to happen, then a 3-day or a 5-day or a 7-day, and then this has got to happen a 3-day. If you just think about that, and it's just more for me to understand from the time, and perhaps the guys in the lab understand this off the top of their head, but it would make more sense to me if this is day one and this is day 60, what happens?
So certainly the answer to your question is certainly you can take the narrative here and turn it into a what we used to call in B school in the 70s, a reverse PERT chart that tells you this is where I end up and this is if I backline it, then this is where I start. Yes.
Think about that. And
I don't know that they do that in 2023 anymore. Of course, we learned to run computers with cards.
Aren't you? Yeah, you're trying to say I'm old? Okay, that's fine.
One thing also about that, Mr. Chairman, is also in this conversation and the last bunch of months that we've had these ongoing conversations, which we appreciate, the idea of also trying to put something together that puts Nevada back where our collective desire and having these conversations is about, is having sort of, all right, everywhere else you're working with that independent test laboratory for that product that's going to go not just to Nevada, but to hundreds, if you include tribals, hundreds of jurisdictions. So our manufacturers don't just have Nevada as a regulator, they've got 300, right? So day one, a lot of times is that those products are going through that process anyway. The second thing is the ITLs are integral to the Nevada process, right? That's why they exist. That's where they're here. And I know in multiple meetings with the technology division, they're an integral part of the process. So when we're starting that day one, is you've got that certification in your hand to start keep this process going forward and to kick any of these timelines into gear. So there's a lot of work that's being done that's already there before you ever get to that point.
Yeah.
So that's never going to encapsulate the entire period of time. There's never a day one. But when we talk about with you've got an ITL certification in hand, ready to move forward in Nevada, we're way down the line and we're much further down the line. And we want to make sure, that's the idea and the concept we put forward here.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've completely heard you on that point that it's a worldwide industry, worldwide manufacturers, and we don't want to be an outlier that slows down Nevada from being, if not our goal of being number one, we want to be that things are working at the same time and Nevada's not slowing anything down. So I absolutely heard you on that. It's a very big, small world. Let me see. We've got Chief Fremont virtually here. I know you're just seeing these numbers and dates and everything today, and we'll have internal and external conversations about this. Is there anything you feel like you need to add right now, just hearing this for the first time?
No, I actually like the idea. I think the timelines might need some deeper thought and see what's practicable. But what I do like about it, it holds both the regulators and the manufacturers accountable. So if we find something and we throw it back into the manufacturer's court, then they have a deadline as well. So not only do we have deadlines, but they have deadlines. Again, I think the deadlines might need to be adjusted a little bit. And I do think there's the concern of the project manager, because if we have a lot going on and somebody's not constantly monitoring this, then something could fall through the cracks and make it out into the field before it's ready to be in the field. But I think the overall concept is good because it brings accountability to both sides. So
great. Thank you. And yeah, I hadn't really thought about what Chief Barbie and Chief Fremont are mentioning. If you watched me in front of the legislature a few months ago, getting software from the Nevada legislature is a challenge. I'll use that word. So we would have to think about, if we create a structure that has hard deadlines, and if we don't meet these deadlines, you track that in the real world. And you guys' business, you go get some software. In our business over here, we can't just do that. We have to do an RFP and a bid and all kind of, and you got to hire somebody. But
this is my other hat. I'm responsible for internal development in our IT infrastructure, and in order to track this granularly, it would require increasing the scope of our alpha migration project. I'm on a fixed budget with that. So in order to add something new, I have to take away something.
Do you think you could pull something off the shelf for just tracking purposes for this?
I think it would be more cumbersome to do that and attempt to integrate it in with our alpha system, our SAGE system.
Yeah.
That being said, we can explore, as we get into the details, we can explore how that might go.
I'll throw in a little commercial here on behalf of the Gaming Control Board. We collect, due to all of you and all the operators in this state, we're just a collection of it, but you bring in approximately $1 billion a year in tax revenue and fees for this state and its citizens. Us being the collection conduit of that, we had to have a computer to collect that data and to run our entire business over here. And by the time we're done, it's going to cost $35 million. And we appreciate that. We appreciate all that you did to explain to any of your legislators that if we don't have a system over here to run our business, we can't collect the tax, and then you can't do your business. So the next time you see a state assembly person or senator, feel free to congratulate them on giving us the money we need. Judge is telling me I said $1 billion per month. Did I say $1 billion per month?
A year. It's a month, right?
Well, the revenue is, but the pure tax collection and fees is $1 billion a year. So the biennium's $2 billion, and our computer system costs $35 million. And so thank you. That's all I'm saying on behalf of all of us. Thank you. I didn't have anything else other than a lot to digest here. Thank you again.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, please.
I should have followed up on this before. So if I understand you guys correctly, before it comes to us, it's already gone through. I noticed Travis back there. Let's recognize Travis from BMM. His lab has already checked it out, right?
That's correct.
And then before it even goes to Travis, you guys have done your own testing and working it out, and probably 6 months or a year even before it even gets to the lab, right?
That's correct, Judge. So the 54 days on Chief Barbie's diagram up there, not relevant. That's not in. That's already all been done before any of these time periods trigger.
And you've already done the calculation in terms of for taxation, what the gross gaming revenue reporting would be for tax purposes?
I'm going to interpret your question. If the particular product is one that has components in it that calculate gross gaming revenue, then those would have had to been vetted before you file the application.
Okay.
That goes to a comment I've made in previous scenarios. If that's not regularly a part of a test script for ITLs for submission of a Nevada product, it certainly should be. That shouldn't be any kind of a surprise to somebody that there's a different calculation for tax revenue from Mississippi to Michigan to Massachusetts to Nevada.
Got it.
They all have different schemes. That's part of the parochial interest of the states.
Thank you. That's all I have, Chair.
Anything else you guys want to add?
We appreciate the conversations over these last 6 months, and we all on the manufacturer side, we want to be in this and we want to be solution oriented, and that's why we put all the work in towards this and how these months of discussions. And we appreciate what you and Chief Barbie and the technology division have brought some other ideas forward. It's making Nevada and improving Nevada, and that's we all have a collective goal. And so whatever we can continue to do on that front, we'll be there.
Thank you. Anybody else who wants to come up and speak during the workshop? Please. Afternoon.
There we go. That's better. Good afternoon, Chair Hendrick, Member Watkins, Judge Assad, Chief Barbie. Thank you for the opportunity to be here today. I'm Chris Soriano, Chief Compliance Officer of Penn Entertainment. With me at the table is Rich Primus, Chief Information Officer of Penn Entertainment. And seated behind us is Brian Wazalewski, who's on Rich's Information Technology team. We will be brief today and wanted to take a few minutes to articulate the operator's perspective on, as one operator in the state who operates the M Resort in Henderson and Cactus Pete's in Jackpot, on how we see the technology process as operators, as ultimately the folks who are responsible for being the final bridge between this whole process and the customer who's going to be using the technology. And then bring it together at the end as maybe a mini case study on a technology that we're trying to get approved here, which is a cashless wagering system that's been deployed elsewhere, and offer some suggestions about how we might be able to continue to work collaboratively to just get this over the finish line. With that, I'll turn it over to Rich, who I think can give an overview of how we see technology as an operator and how our cashless technology is panning out at this point.
Thanks, Chris. And again, thank you, Chairman and Member Assad and Member Watkins and Chief Barbie. Appreciate everybody's time today, and really a lot of positive sentiment for moving things forward, which is really exciting. From the Penn perspective, from technology, specifically as cashless, as it was said earlier, we're in 21 of our 27 in-scope properties and in 11 of our 16 in-scope jurisdictions. We're not going to deploy it everywhere for certain commercial reasons. And we selected a unique approach to cashless, really focused on, one, we have some unique structural things within Penn with multiple casino management systems, and we needed something that was a bit more agnostic, as well as competitive advantage. So we think some of the technology we're delivering allows us to compete in the marketplace better than our competitors and hopefully win market share. So we definitely view we're a technology forward company, and we view technology as a way for us to not only operate, but really compete and win, hopefully, in the marketplace. And our customers let us know. They give us feedback on that. In our cashless journey, one area that we've been stumbling with in Nevada has been sort of the tech standard, and it doesn't always acknowledge that there's various ways of delivering some of the technologies. I believe it was written in a way that at a time where everything was typically delivered from a single vendor, and that was understandable given the point in time when it was created. But now, as I said, we bring other vendor partners in to try to win in the marketplace and do things differently. So everybody's going to probably have some variation on a solution that sometimes is hard to deliver against a standard that makes certain assumptions that it'll be most likely through a single provider. But really what I'd like to focus on from Penn's perspective is how do we work together? And I really mean that because we take working with our regulatory partners very seriously. We've deployed this technology everywhere. How do we work together to focus on what are the outcomes that are desired from the technical standards, protecting our customers, making sure AML is not happening, making sure taxes are paid,
on time and accurately, responsible gaming that was mentioned earlier, and others. So if we could partner to find a way to focus on those outcomes versus the how it's delivered, because the how is always going to be changing, and the tech standard is always going to have a difficult time staying up with the how, but the outcome and the what that we're trying to protect or institute, I think those are the things that we can collaborate on to make sure that we're keeping them in mind. And I think as a result of that, Chris has a few recommendations to put forward.
Yeah, thanks, Rich. A couple of thoughts around how we think this through. When we look at how Tech Standard 3 is written, and I do not intend to go into any level of detail on it. I will keep it very high level. I know Tech Standard 3, though, focuses on a number of things that I think are very important to the board and a number of things that are very important from a public policy perspective. So when looking through legislative history and when looking at best practices and looking at what the board's charges, obviously we share the board's desire to ensure that we're protecting the customers. It's our reputation that's on the line when a customer comes in. So making sure that the integrity of gaming is preserved is a shared goal. Making sure that we are promoting responsible gaming through any new technology. And the comment from the gentleman who started us off today really resonated with us because it's something that's very, very important to us, is incredibly important. And so what are some of the policy considerations that have been out there and that have gone into the drafting of the technical standard? Well, we want to make sure that customers can't walk into a casino with a credit card, insert that credit card directly into a machine, and download directly from their credit card onto a machine. Our system, as we've designed it through modular components, through a wallet provider, a technology provider, and us, solves for that. We have that protection in place. Tech Standard 3 promotes some very forward-thinking and very robust responsible gaming protections that we ultimately as operators are required to deliver as part of the system. I think one of the perhaps considerations to think about in terms of how Tech Standard 3 is written is it contemplates that those protections are provided through a narrowly defined concept of a system. And when you're, as Rich explained, when we're buying components from different places, if we're providing that same robust responsible gaming, which we're successfully doing in 11 jurisdictions, we have some very robust responsible gaming protections built into the system, but it's coming from the wallet provider rather than the device that's in the machine. Can we think of a way to either read the tech standard in a more broad fashion or seek a waiver or think about updating the tech standard to just look at this new world in which we live? So those are a couple of the ideas that we have in terms of how can we move forward. I think we'd be happy to collaborate with anyone in terms of a discussion of how do we make sure that Tech Standard 3, again, remains very robust and provides all of the protections that are required, but contemplates doing so through multiple different pieces of the puzzle at this point in time. We could seek a waiver of the requirement in Tech Standard 3 that this be provided through the quote unquote system and that it be out there. But I want to make clear that, the word waiver is always concerning because it makes us feel like we're asking to be given an excuse from something. We're not seeking an excuse. We want to be here to provide the most robust protections that we possibly can. But I think, as Rich said, what we would like to focus on is how do we get to the outcome and demonstrate that it's all in there. So we look forward to continuing to collaborate with this process. I think some of the ideas that Chief Barbie presented, part of this workshop as an operator, we're thrilled to hear. We look forward to further meetings and further discussions with the board, with Chief Barbie and his team. We look forward to continuing to collaborate on this because we want to bring this industry-leading technology to Nevada, and we want to do so in a way that ensures the highest standards possible. And we want to do so in a way, again, that focuses on what is the outcome of what the statutes, the regs, and Tech Standard 3 are trying to get us to, and let's get there. So thank you for your time. We'd be happy to answer any questions or do any follow-ups.
Thank you. And providing the operator's viewpoint is absolutely vital to this conversation today. You, as you said, are the closest to contacting and being engaged with the consumer. And at the end of the day, it's all about them, right? If they're not enjoying the experience and being part of it, you guys won't be in business and there won't be any need for regulators. So we absolutely agree with that. As far as technical standard revisions, that's what we're here for today. So if you've got specific language that you want to talk about, get that to our senior policy counsel, Sebastian Ross, get it to the Attorney General's office. In this collective, we're going to talk about the standards as well as regulatory changes. So if there needs to be, great. I'm not sure I fully understand the issue. We don't need to get into your specific issue on the record today. But we just got to be sure that there is a license hook on somebody. So if you're, as you're talking about, you're buying pieces and parts, somebody's got to be the one who gets called on the carpet when something breaks, because we don't want the operator being blamed on it, right? Because ultimately, if there's a violation, usually where they end up is on the operator. You guys couldn't report this, or you didn't collect the right amount of tax, or the patron dispute was upset about that. That usually falls on the operator side. So I'm happy to have those discussions, and I'm going to end today by talking about steps forward. So be part of that discussion.
Yeah, thank you, Chair.
Great.
We'd be happy to submit some proposed language on Tech Standard 3 for some further discussion.
Great, thank you.
I just have one question. So how many roughly jurisdictions do you have this cashless system?
It's 11.
11? And of course, they accept cash as well, right?
Yes.
Okay, great.
Yeah, this is meant to be a supplement to the experience.
and-
Customers who choose to use it, and
Sure.
we're not eliminating cash.
And you're going to be presenting something along those lines to us to approve for a cashless system here in Nevada?
Yeah, so
With Penn?
Yeah, so we've been in discussions with Chief Barbie and his team for some time now to try to get us to that point, and we're getting there. And I think with just some of this thinking around language and how do we best confront the language of Tech Standard 3, I think that that's probably what we need to get there.
Great, thank you.
Member Watkins, questions?
I have asked all of my questions. I don't have anything further.
Good, perfect. Thank you, gentlemen. Appreciate you being here.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anybody else wishing to speak in the workshop? Yes, please, Mr. Akers. Afternoon.
Afternoon. My name is John Akers. Appreciate all.
Turn that back. Is it back off? There we go.
Sorry.
Yep.
My name is John Akers. I appreciate all that has happened here today. I've got to say to Member Watkins and Judge Assad that about a month ago, I spoke with each of you and I expressed dismay that nothing was really happening in the first 7 months of these changes. I got to say that ACES and All In give us a lot of opportunity, along with the great work that AGM did. On that, though, I think that some of the things that we're going to ask of you don't quite fit in the discussion we've had today. And I'll start by talking about, I've been here for 51 years now, and a couple times a year drive up and down the strip. And I'm always amazed by the changes that I see, the innovation. Some of it doesn't work out. There were 2 towers that were supposed to hold a Ferris wheel out on the south end of town for some years. A couple of hotels were begun and never finished for a long, long time. Innovation brings challenges, brings setbacks, but innovation also brings new revenues. It completely reinvents the town. If you would have told me that 5 years ago that we'd have NFL football games here, I wouldn't have believed you. But it's happened, and it's great. It's fantastic for the city. Where we lack right now is that true innovation on the gaming floor. And that's not all because of regulatory problems. It's because we tend to think for tomorrow what we had yesterday. And we want to come to you with brand new ideas and ask for a chance to be able to trial them quickly so that we can figure out which one of the 10 is worth commercializing. And that's literally where we're at. We're going to put a lot of things out there. And the first speaker here today, yes, sir, the about problem gambling. I mean, first of all, the courage that this man showed and the selflessness to bring his personal cases to help others is incredible. But our whole business has to be about revenue growth. We cannot grow gambling revenue unless we solve the problems that he referred to. We have to make our products safer than ever before, and that might mean we do it in ways that never been perceived before. We've got a whole lot of ideas cooking that involve cashless and other things that can help people stay within their budget, be loyal customers for decades, and have their family not resent that they go to the casino. There's all that opportunity. But when you think about these things and we talk about budgets of time and how fast can we get approved, I think that the other metric that I would ask all of you to think about is revenue growth. Are we seeing real revenue growth in gambling? Because despite the newspaper stories that say that we had a record year, if you adjust for inflation, our revenues in gambling are down by 20% in comparison to 2006. There's 1/3 fewer slot machines in this state than there were back then. We have a lot of symptoms of degradation in our industry. And if we don't catch fire, this is not just the regulators, this is us as the industry. This is the operator willing to take new chances. This is the manufacturers willing to offer new products. We're going to disappear. We're going to be the Newsweek magazine of the future. There's a lot of opportunity. I hope that we can always be thinking about what the potential increase in quality revenue that provides, as Chairman Hendrick said, the tremendous enjoyable gambling experience for entertainment that is going to be required to attract new players. That we can respect the budgets of everyone, but that we can continue to grow. And instead of you having to have $35 million to build a computer system that manages $1 billion worth of taxes a year, maybe we can give you $36 million to manage a system that gives us $2 billion worth of tax. That's our opportunity. We can grow. With your partnership and with your help, we can get there. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Akers, and you're absolutely right. Innovation, we're regulators here. We're not roadblockers. So anybody who comes up with innovation, we have to be supportive of that. So we completely agree. And you're right. That burden is on you. We can't get into the business side of things. So it's on the business side to do that. And it's on us to not get in the way. So appreciate your comments.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Anybody else wishing to make comments in the workshop? No. All right. Let me kind of sum up here. So we went through what's been done since we met last time, and as Mr. Akers said, for those of you who felt like anything wasn't happening over the last few months, it was just happening behind the scenes. We couldn't change regulations because there was a freeze. As Mr. Reeser pointed out, hopefully we don't need to change regulation. We're trying to find things that don't require statutory change, regulatory change. We're trying to find things that work within the current structure that we can start fixing today. And so that's going to be the goal going forward. Action items for me. We talked today about streamlining. As I said, that's Governor Lombardo's word. We were talking about ACEs, anti-up, all-in, and AGM, which is funny because that comes up with 4 ACEs again. There's 4 A's right there. Those are all good ideas. We're going to need to work on details. So the next step would be getting together with a small working group. Mr. Reeser, I would hope that you, Mr. Dorsey, anybody else who wants to be on a small drafting group between the Office of the Attorney General's office and Chief Deputy Caruso, along with our Senior Policy Counsel, anybody else who wants to get involved in a drafting small working group, let me know. That's, I think, is our next step. How do we move forward and put some of these really good ideas into concrete examples that are going to happen? As Chief Barbie mentioned, ACEs, we plan on kicking off. We're going to put something out to the industry in the next week or two with the idea that that's going to happen on November 1st is the day we're shooting for. So looking at that again, I'm going to use the word revolutionary. That might come back and bite me, but I hope it's bigger than revolutionary. I hope that people are talking at G2E about Nevada just changed the game in terms of getting things out. And with everything AGM's pushing, we're going to look forward to that as well. Anything else from board members today?
I don't have anything further. Thank you.
Judge?
No, I'm good. I'd just like to thank the chair for his initiative in this endeavor.
Thank you. And Madam Secretary, that brings us to our last item on the agenda, which is our second public comment period.
This item is placed on the agenda to give the public an opportunity to comment on gaming-related matters. Anyone wishing to address the board may do so at this time. Comments by each person are limited to 3 minutes as a reasonable time, place, and manner restriction. If board members ask questions of the speaker, the time needed to address those questions will not count against the speaker's 3-minute time period. If speakers have any handouts or written copies of verbal comments to provide for the record, please hand them to the enforcement agent seated to your left in Las Vegas or behind you in Carson City.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. Is there anyone in Carson City wishing to make public comment? I don't see anybody. Anybody else here in Las Vegas who wants to make public comment before we conclude? Seeing none, let me again thank you all for being here. I know it was a long meeting and your participation is absolutely vital. So thank you for that. Everybody watching virtually, we appreciate you following along with us today as well. So with that, I thank you for being here, and that will conclude our workshop. Have a great day.